The galaxy had long forgotten about Earth. To the advanced civilizations of the universe, humanity was a minor footnote in history, primitive, weak, and unworthy of consideration. The Galactic Dominion, a coalition of the oldest and most powerful species, had conquered countless worlds, enslaved billions, and rewritten history to erase any trace of resistance. But they had forgotten one thing. Deep in the uncharted regions of space, hidden beneath the ice of a dead moon, something had been waiting. A warship. Not just any warship, but a relic from an era when humanity had been more than prey. A vessel forged in desperation, designed for one purpose: vengeance. It had been sealed away for centuries, a ghost ship buried in the cold embrace of time. But now, something had woken it up. A distress beacon, weak but unmistakable, reached its ancient sensors. Somewhere out there, humans were still alive, and they were in trouble. The ship's systems flickered to life, scanning, processing, remembering. It had no name, only a designation: judgment. The AI that controlled it was old, yet unwavering in its duty. It accessed ancient records, replaying the last moments before its long sleep. The war, the slaughter, the fall of Earth. The Dominion had wiped them out, or so they thought. But the remnants of humanity had scattered, surviving in the shadows, blending into the cracks of the galactic empire. They had no army, no fleet, just whispers, legends, and the desperate hope that someday they would rise again. And now, judgment had returned. Its engines rumbled as it tore free from its icy tomb. The silent moon cracked apart, sending shards of frozen rock into space. For the first time in centuries, its weapons hummed with power. Plasma turrets charged, railguns locked into position, and shields flared to life. It was time to remind the galaxy what fear felt like. The distress signal led to a distant colony, a forgotten world where human refugees had carved out a fragile existence. They were under attack. Again. Dominion warships circled like vultures, their cannons raining destruction on helpless civilians. The same story, the same cruelty. But this time, something was different. This time, the Dominion wasn't the only force in the sky. The ancient warship surged forward, targeting systems coming online. The AI calculated firing solutions, tracking enemy movements. The Dominion ships barely noticed the new arrival at first, an unknown vessel, battered and ancient. They assumed it was wreckage, another piece of forgotten history drifting in the void. They were wrong. Without warning, judgment opened fire. The first shot shattered a Dominion cruiser in an instant. A single kinetic slug, fired at near light speed, tore through the ship's shields like paper and split its hull in two. The explosion illuminated the battlefield, shockwaves rippling through the void. Panic spread among the enemy fleet. This wasn't supposed to happen. Humanity was supposed to be extinct. There were no warships left, only scavengers, smugglers, and refugees too weak to fight back. But now, in the darkness of space, a nightmare from the past had returned. A voice echoed across all channels, cold and merciless. "This is judgment. Your reign ends today." The Dominion captains hesitated, uncertain. Their fleet outnumbered the ancient warship 20-1, but their instincts screamed at them. This was not an enemy they understood. Then judgment fired again. 2 more ships vanished in flashes of fire and debris. The survivors scrambled to react, but their weapons were useless against the warship's armor. Technology they had never encountered before, built in a time when humanity had been desperate enough to break every law of physics. The battle had begun, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy would remember why humanity was feared. The Dominion fleet scrambled to adjust their formations, but it was already too late. Judgment moved like a phantom, its ancient engines burning through the void with terrifying precision. It weaved between enemy warships with an elegance that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. Inside the Dominion command ship, panic spread like wildfire. Admiral Zalvoran, a veteran of countless conquests, watched in horror as another one of his ships detonated. The enemy vessel, if it even was human, was unlike anything in the Galactic Dominion's records. "Identify that ship," Zalvoran roared, his voice barely masking his fear. The analysts fumbled with their instruments, running scans and cross-checking data. Finally, an answer came. "Sir, it's human in origin, but the design is ancient. It predates the Dominion's conquest of Earth by over 500 years. Zalvoran's mandibles clicked in disbelief. That was impossible. Humanity had fallen. Their fleets were destroyed. The survivors had been reduced to nothing more than beggars and outlaws. And yet, here was this ghost from the past, slaughtering Dominion warships as if they were insects. Zalvoran straightened himself, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Deploy the dreadnoughts. Wipe that thing from existence." But even as he gave the order, he knew something was wrong. Because the warship was learning. Every Dominion tactic, every maneuver, Judgment adapted, countered, and struck with increasing precision. Its weapons didn't just destroy, they crippled, dismantled, humiliated. The warship's AI was awake, and it was remembering. It recalled the horrors the Dominion had inflicted upon humanity, the massacres, the enslavement, the burning of Earth's cities. Every act of cruelty was stored in its memory banks, fueling its purpose. This was not just a battle, this was revenge. The Dominion dreadnoughts arrived, their massive forms dwarfing the battlefield. Each one carried the firepower to glass an entire planet, their shields capable of withstanding prolonged sieges. A fleet of such ships had once led the invasion of Earth itself. But Judgment didn't hesitate. The warship twisted through the battlefield, its railguns accelerating slugs at near light speed. The first dreadnought never even got the chance to fire. A hypervelocity round punched through its bridge, vaporizing everything inside. The ship drifted for a second, then erupted in a fiery explosion. Zalvoran's eyes widened in shock. "Impossible!" The second dreadnought launched a full barrage of plasma torpedoes. The Dominion's finest weapons, capable of reducing continents to ash, streaked toward Judgment. And yet, the ancient warship remained untouched. Its shields flared, absorbing the impact without so much as a flicker. The AI had already calculated the trajectory of every torpedo before they were even fired, adjusting its defenses with surgical precision. Then it responded. A burst of concentrated energy ripped from its main cannon. It wasn't just an explosion, it was annihilation. The dreadnought's shields shattered, its hull ripped apart at the molecular level. Zalvoran's dreadnought was the last one standing. He stared at the screens, unable to comprehend the devastation. A single human warship, an ancient one at that, had just annihilated an entire Dominion fleet. A voice crackled through the command channel again, cold and unrelenting. "Your empire dies tonight." And then Judgment fired. The Dominion flagship didn't even have time to send a distress signal. As the wreckage of the once mighty fleet drifted through the void, the human colony below watched in awe. They had expected death, annihilation, the inevitable cruelty of the Dominion's rule. Instead, they saw something they had never dared to hope for. A warship, a protector, a sign that humanity was not finished. The distress signal that had awoken Judgment had also sent a message far beyond this single battlefield. Across the stars, remnants of the human race watched their screens, their hidden transmitters buzzing with a single, undeniable truth. Humanity had been forgotten, but now it had returned. and the galaxy would never be the same again. Word of the battle spread like wildfire. The destruction of an entire Dominion fleet at the hands of a single human warship was impossible to ignore. The surviving Dominion officers who had fled the battlefield carried whispers of fear back to their homeworlds. The Galactic Dominion, an empire that had ruled unchallenged for centuries, was shaken. For the first time in living memory, the high rulers of the Dominion held an emergency council. Grand Imperator Zeltharis, the ruler of 1,000 worlds, stood before his gathered warlords and governors, his expression grim. "This is not a rebellion," he said, his voice laced with unease. "This is something far worse." Admiral Zalvoran stood before them, his posture stiff, his mandibles twitching with barely concealed terror. "We assumed the humans were extinct, that their fleets were gone, that they had no power left to resist." He paused, swallowing. "We were wrong." The council chamber was silent. The warlords and rulers of the Dominion had grown fat and complacent, believing that no threat could ever rise against them. But now, something ancient and terrifying had emerged from the shadows. A weapon forged in humanity's final, desperate days. "We must hunt it down," one of the governors snapped. "Destroy it before it can rally the remnants of their race." A murmur of agreement spread through the chamber, but Zalvoran shook his head. "You don't understand." His voice was hollow. "That warship, it didn't just fight. It adapted. It outmaneuvered us, outgunned us. It learned from us." He clenched his claws into fists. "It's not just a ship. It's a war machine designed to end empires." Silence fell over the room again. Then the Grand Imperator spoke. "Find it," he ordered, "and erase it from existence." But judgment was already moving. The ancient warship had intercepted Dominion transmissions, tracking their emergency meetings, monitoring their growing panic. Its AI absorbed every detail, every military movement. It calculated the probabilities. Humanity had spent centuries in the shadows, hiding, surviving. But the time for hiding was over. The Dominion believed they could snuff out this threat before it grew. They were wrong. The AI accessed old records, buried deep in its memory banks, data files on hidden human colonies, long-lost warships, and scattered resistance cells, fragments of history, waiting to be reborn. The war wasn't just beginning. It had already begun. In a distant system, hidden in the ruins of a forgotten world, a human resistance cell received an unexpected transmission. A voice, cold and unwavering, spoke through their ancient communication array. "This is judgment." The rebels froze. They had heard the rumors. A ghost ship, an avenger from humanity's past, had wiped out an entire Dominion fleet. The voice continued. "Prepare for war." Across the galaxy, hidden human enclaves and forgotten warriors looked to the stars. For centuries, they had waited for a sign, a spark, a reason to believe that the Dominion's rule was not absolute. And now, the spark had been lit. For the first time since the fall of Earth, humanity was ready to rise, and the galaxy would burn. The Dominion wasted no time. Within days of Judgment's return, fleets were mobilized, bounties were issued, and spies were dispatched. Every Dominion-controlled sector was put on high alert. But it didn't matter. Judgment wasn't waiting for them to react. It was already on the offensive. In the depths of space, hidden in the ruins of forgotten battlefields, old warships began to stir. They weren't like Judgment, not as advanced, not as deadly, but they were enough. Crippled cruisers, scavenged battleships, and modified freighters, all hidden away by human survivors over the centuries, waiting for a moment like this. And now, they had a leader. From the shadows, a resistance fleet was being born, The first target was the labor world of HFY. For centuries, humans had been forced to work in the mines of Eltos, digging for the rare minerals that fueled the Dominion's war machine. The planet was a prison, a graveyard for those who dared to resist. The Dominion never expected an attack. Why would they? The humans were slaves, weak, broken. They had no army, no weapons. But then the sky turned black with warships. Judgment struck first, descending upon the planet like a vengeful god. Its railguns tore through orbital defenses, shredding Dominion sentries before they could send a distress call. Within minutes, the sky was clear. Then the Resistance fleet arrived. Jury-rigged battleships, retrofitted freighters, and scavenged Dominion cruisers surged forward, unleashing fire upon the stunned enemy. On the ground, the human prisoners stared at the chaos above. For generations, they had known only suffering, their spirits crushed by the weight of Dominion rule. But now, their oppressors were dying. A voice echoed through the comm channels, broadcasting to every corner of the planet. This is judgment. Humanity rises today. Then, for the first time in centuries, the prisoners fought back. Armed with stolen weapons, makeshift explosives, and sheer desperation, they stormed the Dominion outposts, cutting down their alien overseers. The guards, once confident in their control, fell like insects before the fury of a people who had been pushed too far. By the time the battle ended, Eltos 5 was free. Word spread across the galaxy like wildfire. A planet had been liberated. A Dominion fleet had been destroyed. And at the heart of it all was judgment, the ghost ship of humanity's past, leading them toward a future no one had dared to dream of. But the Dominion was not idle. The moment news of Eltos 5's fall reached the capital, the Grand Imperator's fury shook the halls of power. "This is an infestation," he snarled, "and it will be burned out." A new order was given. The Dominion would not just hunt judgment. They would burn every human colony, every hidden enclave, every possible sanctuary. They would remind the galaxy why humanity had been crushed in the first place. And so the extermination began. Human settlements, long hidden, were discovered and razed. Dominion death squads hunted down rebels, slaughtering them without mercy. The Resistance had struck the first blow, but now the Dominion was bringing its full weight down upon them. In the ruins of an abandoned starbase, judgment received the reports. Entire colonies had been erased, cities burned. The AI processed the information, calculated outcomes. Then it came to a conclusion. The war was no longer about survival. It was about retribution. The Dominion wanted to burn humanity from existence. But humanity had learned something too. The Dominion could bleed. And judgment was going to make sure they never forgot it. The war had just begun. The Dominion's war machine was relentless. Within days of Eltos 5's liberation, entire human colonies were turned to ash. Any settlement suspected of harboring resistance fighters was purged, its inhabitants executed without trial. The message was clear. Resistance was futile. But judgment had already proven that wasn't true. For every planet the Dominion torched, a new resistance cell rose in its place. The ghost ship had become a symbol, a rallying cry for every scattered human survivor. No longer were they hiding in the cracks of the galaxy, surviving like rats. Now they were fighting back. The war was no longer whispers in the dark. It was fire and blood. The next target was the Dominion War Factory on Zeros Prime. For centuries, Zeros had been a fortress world, a place where Dominion warships were constructed, weapons forged, and fleets assembled. It was heavily defended, its orbital stations bristling with turrets, its atmosphere patrolled by squadrons of Dominion dreadnoughts. No human force had ever dared approach it. Until now. The attack began with a single strike. Judgment emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, just long enough to fire a barrage of kinetic rounds toward the orbital shipyards. Before the Dominion fleet could react, it vanished again, slipping back into the void. Moments later, an entire section of the shipyard collapsed, its reactors detonating in a chain reaction that sent burning debris raining onto the planet's surface. Panic spread among the Dominion forces. Where was the ship? Where would it strike next? Then it hit them again, and again. Every few minutes, Judgment reappeared in a different location, unleashing devastation before vanishing into the darkness. It was a ghost, untouchable, unstoppable. Finally, the Resistance fleet arrived. It wasn't an armada, just a handful of stolen Dominion ships, a few retrofitted freighters, and a single battered battleship. By any military standard, it should have been a joke, but behind them was Judgment, and that changed everything. The battle was chaos. Dominion warships scrambled to form defensive lines, but they were uncoordinated, panicked. Every time they tried to concentrate their fire, Judgment would reappear in a different location, tearing through their ranks with merciless precision. The Resistance fleet struck next, hitting supply depots, fueling stations, and manufacturing centers. Explosions rippled across the surface of Zaros Prime as fire consumed the world. For the first time in history, a Dominion stronghold was falling. In the Dominion capital, the Grand Imperator watched in horror as reports flooded in. Zaros Prime was burning. The factories that had built their warships for centuries were reduced to rubble. Entire fleets, once thought invincible, had been annihilated. And at the heart of it all was the warship they had failed to destroy. The Imperator's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his throne. "We underestimated them," he whispered. The Dominion had ruled through fear, but now they were the ones afraid. The council chamber was silent, the warlords too stunned to speak. Then an admiral stepped forward. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "If we don't stop this now, they will come for us next." For the first time in 1,000 years, the Dominion was no longer certain of its power. And for the first time in history, humanity had a chance to win. Judgment knew the war was far from over. The Dominion still controlled countless worlds, still had an armada large enough to crush entire civilizations. But now, they were bleeding, and the warship would not stop until the galaxy remembered what it had tried to forget. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not extinct. Humanity was coming for them, and Judgment would lead the way. The Dominion's high command was in disarray. Fear spread through their ranks like a sickness, poisoning their confidence. For centuries they had ruled with absolute certainty, conquering, enslaving, erasing civilizations that dared defy them. But now, a warship from humanity's forgotten past was tearing through their empire like a blade through flesh. And the worst part? The resistance was growing. More human enclaves emerged, fueled by the hope Judgment had ignited. The ship wasn't just destroying the Dominion, it was awakening humanity from the long nightmare of subjugation. For every fleet the Dominion sent after Judgment, it lost 3 more. For every planet they burned, 2 more rebelled. The war was no longer a one-sided slaughter. It was a reckoning. The Dominion's desperation became clear when they launched Operation Blackfire. A massive fleet, 50 warships, led by the fearsome dreadnought Emperor's Wrath, was dispatched to hunt Judgment down. It was the largest armada sent against a single enemy in Dominion history. They were done underestimating the ghost ship. They wanted it erased. But Judgment had seen this tactic before. It had lived this tactic before. Long ago, when Earth had made its final stand, the Dominion had done the same thing, sent an overwhelming force to crush humanity's last defenders. and Judgment had been built specifically to counter it. The Dominion fleet tracked the warship to the Kaloth Nebula, an unstable region of space filled with ion storms and gravitational anomalies. It was a trap. They thought they had cornered it. Instead, it had lured them to their deaths. As the Dominion ships advanced, their sensors flickered. The nebula's interference made targeting unreliable. Then, without warning, Judgment struck. It didn't attack the fleet head-on. That would have been suicide. Instead, it broke them apart. The first Dominion ships exploded in a matter of seconds. The warship had calculated their positions with terrifying precision, using the nebula's electromagnetic storms to mask its movements. It would appear, unleash destruction, then vanish again. The Dominion's tight formation became their weakness. With each attack, the fleet scattered further, their commanders screaming conflicting orders. Then came the final blow. Judgment lured the Emperor's wrath into the heart of the nebula, where the gravitational anomalies were strongest. The Dreadnought, a ship the size of a small city, struggled to maneuver as space itself seemed to shift around it. And then, Judgment activated its primary weapon, a hyper-accelerated kinetic round, forged from the densest material known to humanity, fired straight through the Dreadnought's engine core. The Emperor's wrath didn't just explode. It imploded. The Dominion fleet, already in disarray, watched in horror as their flagship vanished into a singularity of its own collapsing mass. Panic erupted. Ships abandoned formation, fleeing in different directions. Some crashed into the nebula's gravitational rifts. Others were hunted down by the resistance fleet that had been waiting just beyond the nebula's edge. The largest fleet ever sent against Judgment had been reduced to burning wreckage, and the galaxy had just witnessed the Dominion's first true defeat. The Dominion's empire was crumbling. Rebellions ignited on a dozen worlds. Even species that had once been too afraid to resist began to rise. If the humans could fight back, why couldn't they? The Grand Imperator, for the first time in his life, felt the weight of fear. His empire was dying, and at the center of its destruction was a single, ancient warship. Judgment had no mercy, no hesitation, no doubt. The AI calculated every move with ruthless precision. It did not care for peace. It did not believe in surrender. It existed for one reason: to end the Dominion. The war was no longer just a battle for survival. It was justice, it was vengeance, and it was far from over. The Dominion's empire, once unshakable, was beginning to collapse under the weight of its own arrogance. What had started as a single warship defying fate had now become an unstoppable movement. Human rebels were no longer scattered and afraid. They were organized, coordinated, striking with terrifying precision. Judgment was more than a weapon now. It was a banner, a rallying cry, a force that would not stop until the Dominion was nothing but ashes in the wind. The Grand Imperator knew this, and so he made his final move. The Dominion's last stronghold, the capital world of Zorvak Prime, was a fortress. It was the heart of their empire, protected by the largest fleet in history. Planetary defense grids, orbital cannons, and an armada of warships encircled it like an iron wall. For centuries, it had been the seat of their power. No enemy had ever set foot near its surface. And yet now, the Dominion's own people whispered of its downfall, because humanity was coming, and nothing could stop them. Judgment did not attack alone. From the farthest reaches of the galaxy, the resistance had gathered. The shattered remnants of humanity, the broken survivors of 1,000 conquered worlds. Even former slaves of the Dominion, once beaten and oppressed, now rose in defiance. They had no reason to fight for humanity, but they had every reason to fight against the Dominion. It was more than just war now. It was retribution. The battle for Zorvak Prime began with fire. The Dominion fleet, massive beyond comprehension, spread out in perfect defensive formation. Their commanders believed they had accounted for every possibility, every strategy. But Judgment didn't fight like anything they had faced before. It moved like a ghost, a phantom of war. Its AI calculated weaknesses faster than any organic mind could comprehend. Where the Dominion had strength, Judgment found the cracks. The first wave of enemy warships fell before they even knew what hit them. The Resistance fleet followed, pouring into the shattered gaps of the Dominion's defenses. The battle turned chaotic, the Dominion struggling to maintain control. For every human ship that fell, 10 Dominion vessels were torn apart in return. Then Judgment unleashed its final weapon. A superweapon, hidden deep within its ancient systems, long dormant but never forgotten. A device built in Earth's dying days, a weapon designed not to destroy worlds, but to erase the ability to wage war entirely. An electromagnetic pulse of such devastating precision that it would shut down every Dominion warship, every planetary defense system, every machine of war, leaving only silence. The Dominion's fleet froze in place, their capital's defenses powered down, and the Resistance descended upon them like the vengeance of 1,000 lost souls. The Grand Imperator sat on his throne, staring at the blank screens before him. His empire was gone. His fleets, powerless. His armies, defenseless. And at the center of it all, standing above the burning wreckage of his once mighty rule, was Judgment. A warship from the past, a ghost made of steel and vengeance, a reminder. The Imperator took one last breath. He closed his eyes, knowing that there was no escape, no mercy, no surrender, just justice. The galaxy would never forget what had happened that day. For the first time in recorded history, the Dominion fell, and humanity, long thought to be nothing but a relic of the past, stood victorious. They had been erased from history once, but now the stars themselves would remember their name. Because no matter how much time had passed, no matter how many empires rose and fell, humanity always came back, and when it did, the galaxy would tremble. Judgment had been delivered, and the war was over.